You know, those of us who work in the world of online progressivism have long been familiar with Media Matters. Media Matters is an organization that's done outstanding work over the years in debunking the falsehoods of the right and going after Fox News and so on. We've had Media Matters folks on this show a lot, but it seemed to change in recent years and may be about to change dramatically again. Our next guest here to talk about that with us is Alex Shephard. Alex is an editor. In fact, he is the news editor of the New Republic, and he is the co-author of a recent piece about Media Matters called What Happens to Media Matters in a Post-Hillary World. So first of all, Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Secondly, well, let me start with this. What stimulated your interest in writing a story about Media Matters in the first place?
Well, I've been covering the changes that may or may not be coming to the Democratic Party, basically since 3 a.m. on November 9th. And I think one of the biggest areas of interest for me has been the donor class, because there's a sort of widely held belief, almost that set in almost immediately after the election that this was the end of Hillary Clinton's political career, that the sort of long-held dream of her one day occupying the White House, which began, you could really say maybe as soon as her husband's presidency ended, but certainly began in earnest in 2004. Was done. But, because so many progressive institutions or democratic institutions, and particularly Democratic donors, had sort of been built up with the expectation that Hillary Clinton would one day become president, they suddenly were faced with this new and very unexpected reality. And Brock's empire, after...
And you mean David Brock. And just for our listeners... You're speaking of David Brock, who's a former right-winger and hatchet man on the Anita Hill situation, who became Clinton, if not a liberal, at least a Clinton loyalist, and has created Media Matters and has, I think, raked up a lot of donor class money along the way, right?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, he actually wrote a sort of negative biography of Hillary Clinton, I think in 1997, that was sort of portraying her as a sort of radical Marxist who was, going to infiltrate the U.S. government and dramatically change it. But David Brock, after he made his sort of highly publicized conversion to, if not the left, certainly to the Democratic Party's big money donors, in 2002, was in this very interesting position because he had created this sort of diverse, almost propaganda arm for the Clintons. And, some of these institutions like Share Blue, which used to be the Blue Nation Review, were just transparently pro-Hillary, But Media Matters was more interesting to me because it does occupy an important role in this sort of progressive ecosystem, right? It debunks conservative misinformation, but over the last 12 years since it started, it's always been kind of wobbly because it has this soft spot for Hillary Clinton, and a lot of its money comes from donors who are donating to Brock because of Brock's proximity to Clinton. So looking at Media Matters, as opposed to something like Share Blue or even Brock's super PACs, Correct the Record, and more importantly, American Bridge, it just seemed a little bit more interesting because it is going to have this longer future. And Brock immediately started transitioning after the election to say, oh, well, Media Matters now is going to go after conservative misinformation on Facebook. We're done with Fox News. Ironically, they had said that they were done with Fox News in 2013 too.
Yeah, I remember that. And frankly, at the time, my conspiracy theory about that, which may or may not have been true, that's when Hillary Clinton was in a period of some détente with Rupert Murdoch, or so it was being reported. But whatever the reason, I remember that was the second time that announcement had been made. I think a couple interesting things happened, and just in the spirit of full disclosure, I worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign. I was his writer. But during the primaries, one of the things that was striking is that some of these other Brock operations, Correct the Record, for example, and Blue Nation Review, became very aggressive instruments for attacking the left. Particularly the Bernie Sanders left. So I think donors who might have thought they were contributing to organizations that would attack the right might have been surprised to find that their money was being used to attack progressive ideas if they conflicted with the Clinton campaign message. And there were also some questions about, at best, was it a gray area that these Brock PACs were coordinating with the campaign and so on. But as you said, throughout it all, Media Matters seemed to be a reliable institution. But you cite in your, for challenging conservative misinformation, but you cite a couple cases where the Clinton loyalty seemed to come into tension with even the Media Matters side of the operation. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a couple of incidents. I mean, Media Matters seems to go through these kind of hot and cold periods with Hillary Clinton that, unsurprisingly, are based on when she is running for national office. So one of the incidents that a number of people that we talked to cited was back in 2014, the summer of 2014, which notably was before Hillary Clinton had declared her candidacy. She went on Fresh Air, the popular WHYY interview show hosted by Terry Gross, and was asked about her support of marriage equality, which, obviously she has kind of changed her mind on that, as many politicians have on the left. But when Terry Gross asked her about it, Clinton was unprepared for the question, even though it was basically an alley-oop. Gross was like giving her the space to say, boy, was I wrong, but
right.
Now I've seen the light and everything is good. But Clinton, as she often does in moments where she's uncomfortable, became defensive and sort of went back and forth with Gross. And Terry Gross is just doing her job, right? And Clinton, ironically, was the one who screwed up softball, not to mix my sports metaphors, but
and for those
Media
who don't
Matters,
know, just to jump in, Alex, for those who don't know, most people know Terry Gross, but she radiates niceness and gentility. We're not talking about Michael Savage here, or, we're talking about a very nice, supportive interviewer. I listened to that interview, who was saying, but she was saying in effect, and I'm paraphrasing, but wouldn't you say you evolved a little bit over, it was right? I mean, and so what happened next? Hillary Clinton got defensive, and they tangled a little bit.
Yeah, and she kind of pushed back, right? It was as if, she was shocked that Terry Gross could be asking her, a very obvious question about her political positions. And again, this was before Clinton had declared that she was running for president. Media Matters basically took it as being this extremely serious moment, right, where Clinton was being badgered by Terry Gross about her support for marriage equality, an issue that had been settled, a few years before. And that's not in any way in keeping with Media Matters' ostensible mission, right, which is to correct conservative misinformation. That is not what Fresh Air is at all. As you said, it's just, it's a definitely left-leaning program, but to even say that it has a kind of political perspective would be stretching things. But, it was reported to us by people who were there as if it was this all-hands-on-deck moment. And, more importantly, there's just no other politician that anything like that would happen with, including, as we saw in the primaries. I mean, Media Matters, for all intents and purposes, Bernie Sanders did not exist in the Media Matters orbit.
Right.
They only had 26 articles tagged total, as opposed to 1,468 for Hillary Clinton. And, one of the issues there may have been that a lot of the misinformation being shared about Bernie Sanders was coming from the Clinton side of things.
Right. No, that's right. Yeah.
Including properties that were, owned and run by Brock. But I mean, there were certainly more than 26 instances where the mainstream media said things that were factually inaccurate, and in some cases willfully ignorant of Bernie Sanders' policy prescriptions, whatever you think of them. And those are mostly just not covered by Media Matters.
Right. And I guess this gets to, one of the things I was thinking when you were talking, and again, we're speaking with Alex Shephard, news editor of the New Republic, is that, other Clinton friendly institutions, and I'm thinking of the Center for American Progress, they do a better job, in my opinion, of being objective. Even in a situation, they might report favorably on a Sanders proposal during the primary, but with the Brock operation in general, and it's especially a shame with Media Matters, it seems like the hand just got heavier and heavier and heavier. And by the way, I know a lot of talented people who work at Media Matters. My executive producer here, Brad Herring, used to work there. I have a lot of friends who used to work there. But it seems as if they just got extremely heavy-handed in terms of, frankly, what seems to me to be an echo of the Clinton team's "you're with us or you're against us," and there's no in-between psychology. It seemed to extend to Brock and not only his propaganda organs like Blue Nation Review, which is frankly silly as far as I'm concerned, but
Me too, yes.
Oh, okay, but to Media Matters as well. And the internet, and the attacks on anybody who expressed a fond thought for Bernie Sanders, whatever. So, what does that mean? What's going to happen next?
Well, I mean, just to go back really quickly, I think one of the things that's ironic is there's the Carvelism, right? That there's one standard for the Clintons and another standard for everybody else, right? Meaning conservative media. And yet the irony of all of this is that for Media Matters, there's absolutely a different standard for everybody else than there was with Hillary Clinton. And you saw this with like the email scandal, right? Where instead of covering it with some, obviously it was blown out of proportion, but there was at least a kernel of something there. And you were never actually educated by reading about it. As for what happens next, I think it's interesting. I mean, they've, in some ways, it could be argued that being freed of having to run defense, which is a phrase that was relayed to us by a number of former staffers for Hillary Clinton, being freed of that responsibility could be great for the organization in terms of fulfilling its mission. I mean, Angela Carasone, who just took over, has said that they want to focus on sort of alt-right organs like Breitbart and on conservative misinformation being spread on Facebook while moving away from Fox News, although I do think that some of Fox's recent moves, specifically hiring Tucker Carlson, suggest that Media Matters will be covering Fox because Fox is absolutely going to be pro-Trump. But I think that the bigger question is about fundraising. I think that most of these moves have been done with donors in mind, right? That Media Matters is trying to quickly rebrand as opposed to being a sort of defensive organ for the larger Clinton network. Now it has to actually do something. And unfortunately,
well, before we get into that, Alex, let me just jump in for a second before we get into it to say, right now, what I'm seeing, if I watch the Twitter feeds of some of these Media Matters and folks, senior people, including people I've been friendly with, what I'm seeing, first of all, we had David Brock saying during the primaries that they were going to spend $1 million on social media, Facebook and Twitter, attacking Bernie Sanders, basically. I don't know if they did or didn't, but that was the claim. I still see an enormous amount of social media output from Media Matters people, top people, that frankly to me is off the wall, but vicious attacks on the left and blaming the 2016 outcome exclusively on the left and in the most extremist way possible. And I'm wondering if this is also part of the formula going forward, try to trash the left and preserve the Democratic Party as the domain of Clinton-like people. Have you heard anything about that?
I think that no. I mean, I had tried to talk to more senior people directly about this, and they, for the most part, towed the line, right? Which is they talked to me as if I was a donor in some ways, right? Which is the language
you got
is
the
very
pitch.
cloaked.
Right.
Yes, I got the elevator pitch, but I think, yeah, I mean, if you look at the output And even there was a recent David Brock there's a very friendly interview with Vanity Fair where he said, oh, places like Huffington Post are progressive, but they weren't quote unquote democratic, right? And that for Brock means that they weren't supportive of the larger existing power base, which means big money donors. And I think that the dangerous thing with Media Matters, especially as, if you look at a few of their most vocal people online, is that they're just interested in relitigating the primary in a not particularly introspective way. And that I think would be a huge failure. And I think that one of the issues is that, David Brock is quite open about the fact that he is not someone who thinks particularly deeply about progressive policies or ideas. He cares about power. And with somebody like Brock in charge, then Media Matters becomes largely reflective of that interest, right? Which, and if you're someone who thinks that the way forward for the Democratic Party is by moving away from its big money base and towards grassroots organization, I think that you should be troubled by at least some of the public statements being made.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but I think that's a great summary. So Alex Shephard of the New Republic, thanks for writing this piece. I thought it was very informative, and thanks for coming on the show.
I had a great time. Thanks.